If you are listening to this episode in real time, that means that it is Thursday, October 22nd, and it is my 37th birthday. And we've talked at almost every episode, I feel like, this year about how 2020 has been a lot. And so I wanted to come in and talk to you about the intentions that I set last year on my birthday before I knew all the things that were going to happen in 2020 and how they have impacted me over the course of this year and impacted me as a leader. See, what happened is that maybe 5 or so years ago in 2016, I found Elizabeth DiAlto, who has since become a friend and someone I really rely on. But at the time, all I knew her as was the embodiment teacher of the Wild Soul Movement program. And I engaged with that program at a really difficult time in my life. And we have an interview with her a few seasons ago that you can go back and listen to the story about that. But a few years ago in 2018, 2019, when she offered her Wild Soul Movement practice in a little bit different container as a year-long program called Power, I participated in that program and really felt deeply how taking a lot of time with each of her core topics benefited and helped me. So I decided last year when I was turning 36 and was in the middle of our program approaching its end that I could maybe even have a more deep doesn't sound right, but like a deeper and more connected experience if I spent a whole year on one of each of the 4 sections of the program. And I don't know if I will do this for 4 whole years until I turn 40 like I had intended last year. But I do know that this year's work has been so impactful for me that I decided to do it again and do the next section of the program next year. So I'm at least going to go halfway. So what happened this year and what did we focus on? Well, 2020 was not playing with me. In October of 2019, I committed to a whole year of surrender and release, particularly around doing work around surrendering my need to be in control, which as a recovering know-it-all type A personality, my need to be in control is huge. And it's meant a lot for our company this year for me to try to work through surrender, not just personally, but in the business. There are a lot of personal things that I'm going to share with you over the next few minutes in this episode, but I want to first talk about why we're talking about surrender and release and this type of embodied living inside of a business podcast. For me, I don't think that my business would have ever been able to get to the point where it was both meaningful work and economically fulfilling if it wasn't for the embodiment work I've learned over the last few years. I was so wrapped up in control, trying to hold things so tightly because I was so afraid of being poor like I was when I was a kid. And I learned pretty young that money didn't buy happiness, but I hadn't yet learned how to let go of the fear of not having money. So I've already shared with y'all, back in season 1, the story of how I was a VP of a top 5 financial institution before I was 22 years old. And I made a lot of money really young, but was tremendously unhappy. So when I left that job to start my own company, I became probably the poorest I had ever been before. Really struggled the first few years in my business. And so all of those feelings started to come up for me that were overlapping from when I was a kid. And finding Elizabeth's work and finding embodied movement and surrender and release started to help me process through those things and started to help me not have to hold so tightly. And it helped me personally be able to enter into stronger relationships, be able to build friendships, be able to be a better parent. And in my business, it helped me be able to see that I didn't have to do everything that was presented to me, that I could charge not exactly what I'm worth, because I don't like that phrase. And if I charged what I was worth, frankly, I'd price myself out of the clients I most want to work with. But to charge what was equitable for both me and the type of clients that I want to work with, and to charge what felt right for me. I couldn't do that before because I was living so much in fear of being in a bad economic situation, being poor, not being worthy, things like that. And so surrender, particularly one of Elizabeth's mantras that's less control, more magic, and we'll link to her in the show notes so you can learn more about this practice, really resonated with me. And so over the past year, I've spent a lot of time with it. And I'm recording this a little ways before my birthday. And as I'm coming up to this time and the end of this year of surrender, really seeing how asking for something, the universe is going to give you what you ask for often, not in the ways that you necessarily expect, but it's going to give it to you in ways that you probably need. And this year has been a constant lesson in surrender, personally, professionally, and even on a global scale with things like the global pandemic. This year, I have had to learn that my children, as they are coming into being teenagers, are not something that I can control. I've had to surrender the idea that I was even supposed to control their decisions so that they could start to more become their own adult people as they go through this transition from childhood into adulthood. And any of you that have had young kids, or had teenagers, you know how this feels. I've had to surrender the whole idea of what schooling should be for my children as we navigate these new virtual waters. I have had to surrender that I could have a speaking career, at least in this moment. That was something that I very much wanted to work on this year. I felt very called when I was doing my planning last year to put a lot of intentionality towards speaking at events. And then the universe basically said, I got my first 2 really big speaker slots came in March, literally in the middle of the shutdown starting, when I had no idea whether it would happen. Both of them did not happen in person. They both happened digitally. And one of the 2 events was really painfully underwhelming for me and a big disappointment. And I had to learn how to surrender that goal that I'd set for myself, where I normally would be driving myself so hard and I would be feeling so unworthy. And I would be feeling like everything was conspiring against me because I said I was going to do this thing this year and the world literally made it impossible. And instead, I just let it go. When it became clear that there was no way we were getting back to anything in person that I would feel safe or morally right in doing in the way of large-scale events or even small ones this year, I just let it go. I used my surrender practices to breathe out the disappointment and breathe in a different way of being this year. And what happened is that I realized that maybe this all happened for the good for me, because maybe I don't actually want a lot of speaking, because I've really enjoyed not traveling a whole lot this year. I don't mean traveling for fun. I like to do that, but not having to be on a plane for a business meeting or to give a workshop or to speak somewhere. It's felt very freeing in a lot of ways. And I've also realized that big, huge, large-scale events are not necessarily the best use of my time. Even though it feels really good to be able to say things like as seen at Inbound or South by Southwest or whatever on your resume, and if you're a speaker that's getting paid to do that and it lights you up, I think that's great. I think it's amazing. I've just realized that for me, I actually like smaller, more intimate experiences better. I like being in groups where I can interact with the audience. I like being at conferences or workshops or events that are smaller in scale where I don't feel super overwhelmed. And I like working with people who are a little bit farther along in their career than you usually get in your workshops or at your speeches at these large scale events in my industry. For example, I think Inbound is a phenomenal event, but for me, I realized this year in the digital version of Inbound, as I was interacting with people, that it really wasn't a group of my peers, and that I would have been better off with some of the smaller scale events being held by my close friends and colleagues and peers than trying to go after this big event. And I learned how to surrender work in our company to other people this year. We've hired several, I'm thinking like six different people this year in varying capacities. We've hired for podcast production. We've hired for copywriting. We've hired for graphic design. We've hired VAs. We've hired content formatters. We've hired on staff and contractors. We've hired a business mechanic who is amazing. We've hired a project manager, and we are about at the end of this year to hire one or possibly two more people. And over the course of the year, as I have thought about surrender, y'all, I realized just a couple of weeks ago that we needed to hire a digital strategist. Because as much as I love being in that role, the only thing that our company does that no one can do but me is hold the container for our values, talk to you like I'm talking to you right now, and vision what the company could contribute to the world in the future. And that means that as much as I love doing keyword strategies and link analysis and working on some copy and helping people through persona development and things like that, a digital strategist within our company that shares our values, that's trained in our methodology, can do those things just as well, if not better than I can, so that I can lead us. And that in our business could be the ultimate surrender for me. It's been something I've been so afraid to let go of. And we are setting things up right now so we can begin the process of doing that in December. So this idea of surrender isn't just for our personal lives. It isn't just a spiritual practice. Although I believe spiritual practices have a place in our businesses, it is a way of looking at the choices that need to be made, a way of looking at the events that happen to us that has really shifted my ability to lead with not only integrity and I hope wisdom, but with a lot of love and compassion, both for other people and for myself. I've had to let go of so many things this year, including one that I'm still very much in progress with, my need for everything to be perfect. I've let go of doing lots of tasks to employees and contractors. I've let go of speaking. I've let go of almost all social media for the business. I do a little bit of posting on LinkedIn still, little bit of when I feel like it on Instagram, but I don't use social media as a business growth strategy anymore. And you can go back to some prior episodes if you want to understand why. And I have let go of the idea that I need to be seen as the expert and the teacher to some kind of big audience in order for our business to grow. Because our business has grown by leaps and bounds this year without me doing that. So there may be a place in the future for me to get that expert status in a larger way, but I'm not chasing it anymore the way I was for so many years. If it comes to me and it's meant for me, okay. But if I'm meant to continue behind the scenes, as long as I'm making a real difference in the women's lives and companies that are having that influence on others, I'm okay with it. And it's been huge for me to get there because I have had to release this idea that I wasn't far enough along. I'm pretty sure that you can relate, right? I mean, how many times have you had that like imposter syndrome of like, oh, I should be farther along. Oh, look at my peers and look at what they're doing. And I've even been able to release, for the most part this year, my ideas about how the business grows. I thought that we were going to become largely a training company. I thought that Local Rockstar would become our flagship product, and we would become one of those online training companies that put hundreds or even thousands of people through a digital course. And what I learned over the course of this year, as I worked with my local rock stars in a year-long program that just wrapped up last month, is that it isn't the right fit for me. I love to teach people, and there are lots of on-demand trainings coming to you in 2021. We already have the Local Rockstar Intensive, the first 3 pieces of it in a DIY format for local listings and persona development and website auditing, where you can buy those trainings and walk yourself through them. But it's not the core of the business. The core of the business is holding a container for these incredible women changing the world, and holding a container for their digital systems so that they can have sustainability in their economic situation, in their lead generation, so that they can continue to do what it is they do in the world at a bigger and bigger level. And that means intimate, one-on-one, sometimes difficult work. And it's not a training company. And so I've had a big shift around that this year, especially as the business has really grown. I've also released the idea that I could or should change the place that I live in order for my business to grow. Amazingly, in releasing this idea, I learned how much connection I could have with other women without actually being with them in person. And I'm not going to say that it's the same, because it's not. It's not at all the same. And I can't wait to be with other women in public, in a group setting again, in some kind of big, meaningful way. But I've had some really great connections this year with new clients and new colleagues and new employees and new relationships and friends, all on Zoom calls and in chat boxes and text messages and FaceTimes. And as much as I'm growing tired of the screen, like I know you probably are too, it feels really good to know that I can have those things without having to live somewhere else. Because the reality of my situation is that I'm choosing to live in this area for at least several more years because it's what's right for my children. And that's okay. And it doesn't mean that I have to slow down the trajectory of my work. And everyone being quarantined has been a great example of how it's so much more possible than ever before for us to work that way. And I feel really grateful about that. And I've also been able to release comparing myself to my male colleagues in that same vein, because this was a thing that I did a lot, particularly one agency owner where we started right around the same time. He's like 15 years older than me, but we started around the same time in the same area. And he now runs a probably 25-person agency in a really fancy office in downtown Tampa. And I used to feel really guilty about that my business was not as successful as his. And I used to compare myself to my male colleagues in a variety of other ways. And what I have learned this year, as I have surrendered and released that comparison and that need to be like them, is that I could run an impactful and successful digital agency without their playbook. That actually the traditional male-dominated bro marketing agency model doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for my clients. And what I needed to do was stop trying to replicate that and create something new, to forge a path for your digital strategy that for a lot of people didn't exist before. Something that feels better and doesn't rely on manipulation and doesn't necessarily have to have every perfect metric in the world or be 100% data driven every second. And it feels really good. Like, it feels really exciting to not just look at data, but to also allow intuition to breathe into the work that we do. To also allow ritual and the beautiful cycles that are the moon or the cycles of female ovulation to impact the way we set up our strategies and the way that we do our work. It's been a revelation this year, and it's been a joy to build my work this way. But I couldn't do any of it until I stopped comparing myself to the, air quotes, more successful male colleagues who were doing it the same old way. By surrendering and releasing so many of these expectations that I had on myself and on our work, I've discovered that I'm able to move people, that the work that I do with people not only moves their business, but also helps them to shift perspective as individuals. Just not in the way I thought it was going to look. I've learned that working with women really is the core of what we do. And that those women need to share our values and be trying to make the world a better place through their work, not just make money. I've had that confirmed for me over and over this year, and it's been really exciting. I've had confirmed for me over and over again this year that when we let go, magical things can happen. So I want to say a big thank you to Elizabeth for first teaching me that lesson. And I also really want to encourage you, if you are listening to this, especially in real time in October of 2020, and just feeling worn out from all the things that we are trying to hold. We're a couple of weeks before an election that I think a lot of us are really afraid of. We're halfway through the first semester of virtual learning for many of us. We're trying to keep our jobs and our businesses and our relationships and our lives afloat in a very difficult time. And so I want you to explore the possibility that maybe surrendering all of our best laid plans and releasing our need to do things in a particular way or at a particular time could just be the best medicine for this moment. Taking the space to surrender and release those things that don't serve us opens us up for compassion and for forgiveness. And for me, as I turn 37, to move into a year focused on trust and learning how to receive. I am a little bit scared of this topic in a way that I was not scared of surrender and release, because trust and receptivity have historically been the most difficult things for me to work with. I have a really hard time trusting other people. I have a really hard time letting other people do things for me. But I'm getting better and better at it every year. And I'm really excited to see what magic happens when I work on it for a whole year. So if you have a birthday coming up, or maybe not, maybe just the next time your birthday comes around, or if you just feel like you need a reset, what would it look like for you if you spent a whole year working on just one thing? If you spent a whole year breathing into just one thing to challenge yourself or change yourself. No more self-help books or business development books or any of that. You don't need them. Just one topic. What would it shift? It's been miraculous for me. It's been a beautiful year despite everything going on around us. And I feel so much gratitude and so much love for each and every one of you who has made our work not just impactful and beautiful and loving, but has made our work really make a difference in the communities that we serve and help people in this moment in a way that I never could have imagined. Because I never could have imagined a moment like this. So I want to thank you all for giving me like the best birthday present that you possibly could, which is your attention and connection. And I just hope that the rest of 2020 leaves you feeling as much joy as I am feeling right now because of each and every one of you. All right, I'm heading out to party for my birthday, y'all. Have a great week.